Welcome back to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the meteoric rise, the absolute unmatched genius, and, honestly, the truly tragic fall of an American icon. We're unpacking the checkered life and the global exile of Robert James Bobby Fischer.
Hero of the Cold War, or a stateless, exiled fugitive. It's kind of the ultimate paradox, isn't it? I mean, how exactly does a chess prodigy, a kid born in Chicago in 1943, raised in Brooklyn by a single mom who literally learned the game at just 6 years old from a little instruction booklet inside a cheap plastic chess set, how does he end up an enemy of his own country? Well, that is exactly the journey we're mapping out today. Section 1. The Boy from Brooklyn. To really wrap our heads around Fischer's eventual downfall, we've got to first look at his obsessive roots. His chess habits didn't just casually consume him. Get this. He actually taught himself foreign languages for the sole purpose of being able to read Soviet chess journals the very second they were published. And man, did those obsessive habits pay off at breathtaking speed. At just 14 years old, Fischer became the youngest ever United States chess champion. And then a year later, at 15, he achieved the title of youngest Grandmaster in the entire history of the game up to that point. He wasn't just some child prodigy. He was completely upending the whole chess establishment.
And as he marched toward the World Championship, he achieved what can only be called absolute interzonal dominance. He pulled off these unprecedented, back-to-back 6-0 clean sweeps against world-class grandmasters Mark Taimanov and Bent Larsen. To put that into perspective, in professional, top-tier chess, a 6-0 sweep is kind of like pitching 2 consecutive perfect games in the World Series. It was a feat that had literally never been seen before and actually hasn't been repeated since.
Which leads us right into Section 2, Match of the Century.
By 1972, Fischer had fought his way to the championship in Reykjavik, Iceland, going up against Boris Spassky. But remember, this was the absolute height of the Cold War, and the chessboard became a literal proxy battleground. You have one lone American challenger going toe-to-toe against a 24-year continuous Soviet chess reign. The pressure was just immense. The Soviet Union treated chess as a clear demonstration of intellectual and ideological superiority, and they held an absolute monopoly on the world title. And here was Fischer, single-handedly taking on the entire Soviet chess machine.
Now, the match was steeped in drama right from the get-go. Fischer made these endless, highly eccentric demands. He objected to the television cameras, he complained about the lighting, he demanded a very specific chair, and he even forfeited the second game entirely just by refusing to show up. But despite all this highly erratic behavior, Fischer's sheer genius prevailed. When he actually sat down at that board, he was completely unstoppable, eventually defeating Spassky 12.5 to 8.5. Overnight, he became an instant global celebrity, an absolute American hero.
But then, things take a turn. Section 3. The Ghost of Chess.
You see, the exact uncompromising traits that made him a world champion, his extreme perfectionism, his relentless isolation, they eventually triggered a profound descent into paranoia. The breaking point hit in 1975. Fischer was scheduled to defend his hard-won title against the young Soviet star Anatoly Karpov. But instead of just playing, Fischer issued an ultimatum. He sent 17 incredibly strict demands to FIDE, the International Chess Federation. And when the Federation refused to grant every single one of them, Fischer did the unthinkable. He resigned his world title and walked away from competitive chess entirely.
What followed was a tragic series of lost decades. After resigning in 1975, Fischer basically spent the 1980s living like a ghost, mostly out in California. He gave away a huge chunk of his wealth and actually joined the Worldwide Church of God, which was a fringe religious apocalyptic sect. And during this really dark period, he developed a deep, virulent anti-Semitism and an extreme, deeply paranoid distrust of the United States government. He pretty much remained hidden away until 1992.
Section 4. Becoming an American fugitive.
So, flash forward to 1992. Fischer suddenly reemerges for a highly publicized $5 million rematch against his old rival Boris Spassky, organized by millionaire Vasilis Maliaras. But here's the massive problem. The match was held in Sveti Stefan in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, right in the middle of the brutal Balkan Wars. The U.S. Treasury Department sent Fischer a very strict cease and desist letter. See, the UN had placed severe economic sanctions on Yugoslavia, and an executive order signed by President George H.W. Bush strictly prohibited Americans from engaging in any economic activity there. The letter explicitly warned Fischer that playing the match carried a penalty of up to 10 years in federal prison. Fischer's response? Well, it was shocking. In an act of pure, unregulated defiance at a televised press conference in Belgrade, Fischer pulled out that official U.S. government warning letter,
held it up, and literally spat on it on live television. Yeah, he actually spit on it. It was the ultimate point of no return.
He went ahead and played the match anyway. He defeated Spassky again, and he claimed the winner's prize of $3.35 million. But, as you can imagine, that money came at a steep cost. Immediately following the match, a federal grand jury issued a warrant for his arrest. Fischer's public desecration of the Treasury document and his blatant violation of international sanctions permanently cemented his new status. He was now an official American fugitive, unable to ever return home.
Which leads us to Section 5, Final Moves in Iceland. Unable to step foot in the U.S., Fischer spent the next decade drifting around the globe, basically seeking out countries that didn't have U.S. extradition treaties. He found some brief solace in the Philippines, a country he really grew to love. There, he lived among the local chess community, spending time with friends like former FIDE President Florencio Campomanes, Grandmaster Eugenio Torre, and Marilyn Young, who, tragically, for years Fischer falsely believed bore his daughter.
However, impartial records show his time in the Philippines also marked a catastrophic mental decline. Fischer began making frequent, really erratic appearances on a local Philippine radio station called Sports Plus. But rather than discussing chess, he launched into extreme anti-Semitic and anti-American tirades. This culminated in a truly shocking moment on September 11, 2001. Just hours after the terrorist attacks, Fischer called into the station and openly praised the events, literally stating on air, "I want to see the U.S. wiped out." This completely sealed his fate in the court of public opinion and massively intensified government efforts to finally capture him. And this led directly to the end game of his exile. In 2004, while trying to travel with a revoked passport, his luck finally ran out. He was arrested at Tokyo's Narita airport. He was detained for 8 months in a Japanese cell while the U.S. aggressively demanded his extradition. Desperate, his supporters reached out globally. Then, in an extraordinary move in 2005, the Icelandic parliament, remembering the lone genius who had put their capital city on the global map back during that 1972 match, stepped in. They granted Fischer full citizenship on humanitarian grounds, officially rescuing him from extradition. Fischer was flown back to Reykjavik, the exact site of his greatest triumph, to live out his final years. But, there was no fairy tale ending here. He lived as a bitter, reclusive citizen, mostly spending his days quietly in local bookstores. Driven by his lifelong, consuming paranoia, he stubbornly refused conventional medical treatment when his health eventually failed. And on January 17, 2008, Bobby Fischer died of degenerative kidney failure. He was quietly buried in a small churchyard just outside the city. Now, his death revealed one final, almost unbelievable detail. Bobby Fischer passed away at the exact age of 64. As you probably know, there are exactly 64 squares on a standard chessboard. There is this profound, almost tragic, poetic symmetry in the fact that this uncompromising genius lived out his years to exactly mirror the parameters of the board that had completely consumed his entire existence. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to mull over. Was Bobby Fischer a hero, a villain, or ultimately just a victim of his own mind? The history is undeniably checkered. Take a moment to reflect on that duality, that razor-thin line between extreme, world-conquering brilliance and unregulated, destructive obsession. And consider the profound human cost of individuals who end up becoming pawns in these massive geopolitical proxy wars. Keep learning, keep questioning, and thanks so much for joining me today to explore the incredibly complex legacy of Bobby Fischer.